Hi, my name is Antonio Gamino, and I'm the product owner for the Vulcan. Today we're going to be discussing the original hose assembly versus the updated hose assembly. Diving into the original hose assembly on the Vulcan, coming off the main inlet of the hose, we originally had 2 hoses and an elbow. With that, we found issues with leaking, and so we decided to convert it over to one complete molded hose. And then moving over to the updated Vulcan for the hose assembly, with the molded hose. So now it's just one complete molded hose. With that, we eliminated 2 extra leaking points inside the Vulcan. So moving on to the back of the Vulcan, the other change that we made from the original Vulcan, we originally had a hydro wire harness, which we no longer use. So we went ahead and removed it and capped it off to reduce the amount of corrosion that we get inside of our wires. When installing the HT connector, you want to make sure that it's lined up with the other connector, and the other connector has a smooth surface on the top, and you will line those 2 tabs up together, but you also want to make sure that you don't apply too much force, because in doing so you could possibly damage pins. And so once you get it lined up and seated in place, you'll then tighten it down clockwise. We want to make sure that we have proper placement for the connector, because when you're installing it onto a unit, you're going to have a little more, leverage to deal with. And so you'll slide this back and then put the soybean connector in, and then apply some substantial force and lock it in place. And after locking it in place, you can do a tug test to make sure that it doesn't come loose. So moving on to the coolant outlet side, we're going to be this time utilizing the female soybean connector. And with this one, we'd have to lock it back in place, push it onto the mount, and then lock it in place. For your fuel outlet, you'll have a male connector, and then for your fuel inlet, you'll have a female connector. On the way to install these all you have to do is put the female to the male and then push down on it, and it'll lock it in place. There's no need to try to hold it back and push it in place. You'll just slide it in, apply pressure, and then lock them in place. When powering up the escape system, for the Vulcan side, you'll see a white light, and that'll indicate that the Vulcan is ready and operable. After about 20 seconds of the escape system being on, the light should change to green, showing that it's working but in an operable state. Dependent on your customer parameters, the Vulcan may kick on and start warming up your system. And in that process, you will see a white and yellow light, a blinking white and yellow light. That'll show you that the Vulcan is powering up. After 2 minutes of the light blinking white and yellow, it should go back to a yellow light, showcasing that the Vulcan is running in a startup phase. After the Vulcan has finished warming up, you should then see a yellow and green light, which will showcase that the Vulcan is shutting down. During the Vulcan shutdown phase, we want to make sure that we do not power down the escape system. If you power down the escape system, it'll cut off the fan supply and could possibly damage the internal components of the burner head. During any operation phase while the Vulcan's running, if you get any air or Vulcan shutting down when it shouldn't be, you'll get a red light. In that process, you can go over to the escape system on the escape and look at your DTCs on what was the cause of the failure. As I mentioned before, shutting down the escape system before the Vulcan has properly shut down, that can cause flashback or residual heat staying inside of the chamber, which can cause certain components to melt or get damaged. As you can see on this one, the heat, when it was shut down before the Vulcan cool down process was finished, the heat stayed inside of the burner head and melted the components on here, and it also warped the fan. Going forward with our maintenance plan, we have a 6-month and 1-year service. The 6-month service that we do helps maintain your 1-year warranty. The tools that you'll need to perform this maintenance is a 13mm, 14 and 17mm wrench. And then on top of that, you'll need a 13 little ratchet and a 10mm socket and an impact. To start off, we will use a 10mm socket to pull off your service panel. You'll open your service panel, which will showcase your burner head. Moving inside the Vulcan enclosure, we will have 2 fuel hoses, one on the front and one on the back for your inlet and outlet. Those will have a banjo fitting with 2 washers on it. We will use a 14mm wrench to pull off those banjo fittings off the burner head. Moving on to the back side, you'll have an additional 14mm banjo fitting that you will also break loose. And after breaking that loose, we can move up to your burner head wire connectors. These have little clips on it and they can be pretty tight in place, so you might need a little tool to help adjust and slide it out. After further use or over time, these get a little brittle, so you'll need to be careful with them. After disconnecting the harness, you want to make sure you set it off to the side. That way it's out of the way when you're pulling the burner head off and putting it back on, because you may forget and close the burner head on top of the wires and damage them in the process. After removing the burner head, the component that you'll be changing is the burner head nozzle. And with that, you will have your service kit. And in there you'll have your fuel filter for your fuel, and then your spare banjo fittings and nuts and washers for your service panel, and then your burner head nozzle. When replacing the burner head nozzle, you want to make sure that you have gloves and you're not touching it with your bare hands. Also, when replacing the burner head, we want to make sure that you'll take a screwdriver and you will pop up the electrode and set that off to the side. And at this point, you'll be able to unscrew your burner head nozzle and replace it with a new one after the service. For 24/7 support, you can call us at 972-746-4217.